Hello and welcome. I'm going to paint this lovely river scene, and I'm going to start with just painting shapes and see how far that gets us. So on this demo, we're just going to paint shapes to start with. So I'm not going to start with my traditional drawing that I do, but sometimes, maybe it's good just to paint shapes. So that shape is that shape. So in a way, you are doing the drawing, but just going about it differently. That we've got a shape here. We'll just paint that all as one shape. There's those trees, and sometimes it helps not to think about them, as trees. They're just shapes. There's a shape there, a similar shape there, and the shape gets smaller as it disappears off down here. And there's a nice little shape there, acts as a nice little stop. And we can put those shapes underneath, which we know they are reflections. And already we've got a scene. Look, how good is that? So we're off to a flying start. So far so good. So more shapes. We've got a shape that's light in tone down here. But, I've got my normal lot of colours on here: titanium white, cadmium yellow pale, azaran crimson, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber. These are the few random colours here, which is raw sienna, cobalt blue, cerulean blue, and some cadmium red, and there's a bit of sap green. They're just left over from my recent on plein air painting trip. A tiny bit of paint left on the palette. There's no point throwing it away. But don't need those colours to do this painting, but might as well use them up. And I painted on plein air on a panel like this. This is 12 by 16 inch. I don't normally paint as big as this on plein air, but I do use the panels because they're quite robust for travelling. So there we go. That's another shape in there. Looks something like that. So same again. I'm painting thinly to start with, and I'll get thicker with the paint as we go. And I'm not worried about matching these colours. Tonal value is all I'm really worried about. That you could, if you want to, put this is a laminated photo. You could put the paint on there and just check that you've got the right colour if you're unsure. I've got lots of videos where I've done that. So again, I'm just painting shapes. I see this shape kind of looks something like that here, and then it comes along here, and I can see the shape kind of finishes at the top of those shapes there. And, we can call them trees, but sometimes that particularly if you're painting certain subjects, that it helps sometimes not to call them by what they are, because you kind of tap into those little symbols in your brain that you know what they look like, and then you don't actually paint what's there. So it doesn't matter if I don't get all these shapes in the right place, because the sky's always changing, isn't it? And we may need to change it to make a better composition. Although it's pretty good, this composition, the photo is quite nice. Save my light for here. So this is the important part of the painting, really. We've got light there, another bit of light there and there. But as long as we get that in the scene, we should be all right. I'll bring it down a little bit lower there. So switch to another brush. We'll get some blue onto there. So this is kind of a blue painting, isn't it? So we use, you could get to that blue several ways. You could use just the ultramarine blue with other, white and yellow, whatever you need. But I can use some of this blue as well. Use it up. Don't want to waste paint. But I think people worry too much about having the right colours, the same tubes of paint that I've got, or another artist you're following their demo. It really honestly doesn't matter. You can use any brand as long as it's good quality paint. That's all that matters. And just desaturate that blue a little bit, and now I can just hold it up to there, squint slightly. It looks about right, maybe just a little bit less blue. And let's get some of that in there. And I'm not going to be blending here. I'm just going to fill those spaces in there. And I should just keep going until I've covered the canvas. And keep it nice and thin to start with, because I may need to make changes, so it's easier to make changes if the panel or canvas you're using isn't completely covered with paint. A little bit lighter in the sky, so maybe that cobalt blue would be quite good. Give that a whirl. That's good. So if I get that blue into that green, we're going to end up with a green sky, so I need to be fairly careful. And I'm starting off on this toned panel, and I don't mind if some of that orange comes through. It will unify the painting, and it will also add a bit of warmth to the scene. And just fill in some of those gaps there with the sky. And then it goes more grey there. I can get that colour by just adding more burnt umber, darker in tone as well. Do a little test. That's too dark. A bit of white, lighten it slightly. Another little test. That looks pretty good. We had a few good days of weather, and I went outdoors painting. I did a live stream in oils, painting the Seldon-Wars, the bridge. So have a look at that if you're interested. And the weather's gone a bit wet again now, so back in the studio painting. But I do go outdoors and paint as much as I can. It's a great way to learn to free yourself up. I think that's what we're all looking to do. Particularly if you're following my channel, I think you want to loosen up and paint loose impressionistic brushwork. Go outdoors and paint. That's your best bet. So it's good to do your studio stuff to build your confidence, but when you go outdoors and paint, you're really doing it then. But a little bit lighter at the top here. And just again, I'm still painting shapes. That's my title for the video. Painting shapes, and it's already starting to take shape. The colours aren't the same as the reference picture, but I don't mind. It doesn't have to be always the same. But quite often I'll look to copy the photo, but that's more for teaching. That sometimes it's just nice just to go for it and see what you can come up with. So again, I don't want to be blending that because I'll just end up with a mess. But I can paint up to these other shapes I've put in, and they will blend to a certain degree. But that's what I'm doing by just painting up to it and just let it blend a little bit, but without scrubbing at it. I'll soon end up with a mess if I do that. And I use a variety of brushes. That was a flat brush. Now I'll have a go with a round brush. And tonal value, I say that on every video, but it is that important. Always be checking your tonal values. If you get them wrong, you're always going to you're struggling to produce probably the painting you want to produce. It's so important, you know. That's lighter, it gets slightly darker, and then it's slightly darker again. And sometimes if you turn your reference picture to a black and white photo, it's easier to see the tonal shifts. But it's not easy to see them, you know, if you're a beginner. I struggled to see them. That's one way you can do, is say black and white photo, and you know, even use your black and white photo to paint from, and just go for you know, come up with your own sort of color scheme. Just as long as your tone values are right, it will probably read well as a painting. So this little brush is doing quite well, so we'll stick with that for a little bit. So get a little bit of warmth in that sky. To get it the right tonal value. It's quite grey, isn't it? But there are some grey bits in there, so let's put those in. So I can kind of, where I've got that orange coming through, I can put that in there and use these directional brush marks to direct the eye. You know, I suppose my focal point is here, so you know, these will be quite useful brush marks to point us in this direction. And I'm painting with my arms stretched out, holding the brush at the end. One, to keep out of the way of the camera, and it will free my brushwork up as well. That you know, if you're painting like this, you know, you're going to get very tight marks. Have a go at just freeing your hand up, you know, almost sort of paint from your shoulder rather than your wrist. It's good fun as well. I'll have a break from the sky, I think. Come back to that in a minute. Let's do some stuff to the water, but it's looking all right, the sky. I could do that a little bit in there, and then we've got the sky covered. And come back to it. You know, I've painted thinly here, so it's not causing me an issue by coming over this with that other paint there. We're going a little bit lighter there, maybe. Right, a bit more to the water. So we kind of need to replicate what's going on above, but it's slightly darker in tone in the water. So we've got some of that blue there. So same method, just lay the paint on, not mixing. It's surprisingly quite sort of, you know, steered towards grey opposed to blue. It's, you know, not blue, it's, you know, as grey as that. And you just got to trust, you know, you mix your colours, and you just got to trust that that's what it is. So we may have to go a little bit fiddly here with detail, but see. It's a little bit lighter here. Back to my other brush, which had the light tone on it, loaded up. You know, these marks will look awful, you know, up close, but you know, step back from it and it will work. And directional marks. Be careful I don't muddy all this up. That for the moment. Let's work on this green area again. So I've got some of this sap green. I very rarely use greens straight from the tube. I actually put it out on my palette, my on plein air painting, but I never actually used it. So I just didn't necessarily think to use it. It's a transparent green this is. It's quite nice. Maybe I should use it a bit more maybe. So this is a hog brush, filbert, cat's tongue, if you want to call it. Gives some interesting brush marks that would look like trees. So that's that green pretty much used up. Waste not, want not. But we do need a bit more body to it. So a bit of blue, brown, yellow. That's going to give me a nice dark green. And now the canvas is covered, I can perhaps start to use thicker paint. Just laid on like that. That's the finished painting there. And I've got to be careful not to paint up into the blue, because there's a lot of white in there, and that will milk it up and cause problems. I'm not looking at trying to create a detailed painting, just an impression of this scene. I was in the Creuse department doing en plein air, the Valley of the Painters it's called, and impressionists were painting there, so take inspiration from their marks. That's what I'm going to do. Not say this is an impressionistic painting. I'm not really sure whether you would consider this an impressionistic painting or not. That a loose painterly style maybe. But I've banded about that I'm doing an impressionistic painting, and I get told off in the comments to say it's not impressionism, but who cares? It's a painting. It's the bank there. That probably had that a little bit too high, to be fair, but it's fine. We can sort that out. It's amazing how you can get it to look fairly detailed with just these painterly marks. That brush about, maybe try and create the impression of a tree. Same for that one maybe. And whatever works. That's my motto. And paintings like this I find tend to be more popular than the photorealistic stuff. I find that I think they have more feeling about them. But certainly they sell better, I found. But, the impressionistic stuff, I think just touch people sometimes. That's looking all right. So the reflections seem to have more blue in them. Let's get those in. So obviously I need to react to what's going on above. Let's just bring that up slightly. More green in there. And it's an incredibly fast way of painting, doing this sort of method. Get the painting finished within, an hour and a bit maybe, if not less. Not like I say, it's not a race, but when you're outdoors painting, it kind of is a race. You've got to paint quick. But before you know it, the sun's gone down. This was painted. The photo was taken as the sun was going down. So I actually did a watercolor live stream here, but I think this subject is suited to both. So we've got light against dark there. That's going to good. So we could do with raising something up there. We don't want it too uniform, and that gives opportunity to bring that down as well. So connection there, that connects to the bank there. What I can do is I've just scrub that brush off and get a lot of paint off with just a tissue, and maybe let's just put in a few horizontals. Suggest that surface there. Fiddle about with it too much, just a little bit. Let's work on this a little bit here so it's warmer because it's closer to us. Let's use that little bit of yellow I've got there as well. So can mix on the panel. Again, I'm not going to paint individual blades of grass. I haven't got the patience to do that. So we can suggest it. It's a bristly brush, ideal. They're all going off in different directions. And that's doing the job. So it's kind of up close. It looks like a mess, but occasionally I'll have a look at the. I've got a monitor that I can monitor that it's still recording and the volume and everything's working okay, and it looks really good in the photo in the monitor. So that gives me an idea of perhaps how other people see this painting, because you have to remember that when you're painting that you'll never see the painting how someone else will see your painting. How many times have you finished your painting and you're disappointed? I'm disappointed after most of my paintings, but I look at them again in a few weeks, and actually I was quite pleased with that. Really, it's just I suppose we have these expectations of what it should look like, and which is probably that the photo. So it's not going to look like that. It's going to be a painting at the end of the day. And where I'm seeing it from here, it just looks awful with these brush marks and so on. But step back from it and I put it in a frame, which we'll do at the end of this video, and it will look great. So let's have a go back in the sky. It's the panel's covered, but there's not enough paint on here. It's very thin areas and so on. But what I've got to try not to do is lose this. It looks good, that it can so easily be overworked. That's what we've got to be careful of. So I've been using hog hair brushes. This is a synthetic brush. This is a Rosemary & Co brush, which is quite soft. So maybe that'll be good for laying the paint on here. So let's have a go. Use some more. Got some of this yellow ochre deep. This is a Michael Harding one. Let's give that a whirl, mix it with the white and see what that will look like for this light in the sky. It's not white paint, it steers towards yellow, but the cadmium yellow is just going to be too yellow. So I just want to tint it to start with. So that's more yellow there. So again, this is where the camera has exposed or hasn't exposed properly. I'm not a professional photographer by any means. So I've got to kind of remember what did it look like while I was there painting. We've got to try and make note of these things. So I want to really create that sense of light. I've just got to lay the paint on because it'll just soon become a milky, muddy mess otherwise. So, and I suppose the sun is probably just dropped in behind this cloud here, so that's why there's a lot of light here. So more yellow, I think. So thick paint now. Brush is really loaded up. If I want the paint to leave the brush without messing up what's underneath it, you've got to have thick paint. And that flat brush is working quite well to create these interesting marks. And I can't just put this everywhere because you need the darks to make this light. So I can't lose the dark areas here. But putting a light against a dark, that will make it seem lighter. I've got quite thick paint there, sort of raised from the surface, which will catch the light. This is paint's being lit from above here, which is why it's looking quite bright. So how you light your paintings makes a big difference to what they look like. That's why they look good in the galleries, because they're being lit properly. Obviously, when you get it home and put it on your wall in the different lighting, it may not look the same. And if you look at some of these old houses that have got these really old paintings, they're almost black. You can hardly see them until the light is on them. But that's how they were painted, and how they get those lovely effects. So again, I'm still back to looking at my shapes, just following where this light goes, where it just breaks between these clouds. And again, directional marks, but difficult to leave these marks here because they just look awful. But I know from experience they'll look okay. If I'd leave them like this, it'll look better than scrubbing at it and trying to blend and make it look like the photo. It's not going to happen. So I've got the silver lining of this cloud. So there's a lot of paint on here, so as this white hits that, it's going to go away from white, and I can use that just to tone that cloud. I don't have to paint all the detail, just create an impression. But if I look really carefully, I can see it steers towards a warm colour here. It gets quite warm up here. And that's kind of an orange colour, which will work really well with the blue. So I've got to be careful I'm not have too much light. I'm going to need to come back in with some darks, I think, that try a bit of that cadmium red. A bit in here. That's why sometimes it's good to have a break from the sky and come back to it, because sometimes you can't see what you're doing. Right. Now I need to get some of that warmth in the water here for it to make sense and replicate what's going on above. This reference picture I shall share on my Patreon page, and there's lots of demos on there that aren't on YouTube, and also it's a great way to support me. But it's also I think I've shared it on Inspirational Photos for Artists Facebook group. There's a link in the description. But don't forget to share your photos too if you join that, so we can all benefit from these photos. That's the light coming across here. And, I may well blend some of this towards the end, but I will do it at the end because, I can then be picky and choosy to what I want to blend. So let's work on this green bank, which will just separate the bank, the top to the reflections. But I do want to perhaps have a bit of connection, so just break it up in places. Again, there's thick paint on there, so I've just got to lay that on. Where it disappears off here, that's it. It does kind of just disappear off there, so we don't really need to worry too much what's going on there. Get some darks in. It's got this painting relies on tonal contrast, that light against dark. Nice strong dark in there. Just make this, almost straight line across there. We want it to be abstract. Enough detail for that, really. Maybe at the end I'll just come in and just put a few little bits of detail on there, but I'll do that at the end. So a bit more work on the water reflections. So we've got a nice strong dark there, and I think horizontal lines will work best here in conjunction with just a few verticals. And it'd be very easy to just mess this up, so it's best to go a bit careful. Light there, dark, put those together, and that'll create a nice bit of contrast. And let's just drag that across here. And back in with some of that blue, grey blue. And maybe I can just see a touch of purple in there, so just a touch of red. There's swirls and all sorts going on in this water, so try and just break the surface up. I've got these bits of orange coming through, which is good, but not too much, so I can use those to let me know where to perhaps place some of these variations in the tone there, and it just helps to create that flow of water. Probably fine, I don't want to overwork it. We need to get that sunlight here really to look good. So let's try some yellow, touch of red, create that fiery color. Lay the paint on. in there as well. Real kind of hot spot. This is thick paint, which I'm just going to have to just lay on there. Once it's on, don't fuss with it. So if you don't get it how you wanted it, make a decision whether it's worth messing it up. So just leave it at that. He says, but I'll probably go back and fiddle with it. There's there. A few little flecks of light. I think I definitely need to get some darks into this sky. So I'm not worried about getting the colours exact, but I do need to get the tonal value right. So I'll have to kind of judge it because there's already paint on here and it's inevitably going to mix with what's on here. You can't avoid it. So you just have to judge. And the only way you can do that is just to paint and practice. Light against dark there. So this is blending a little bit now to create some softer edges where I want them and harder edges and so on. It's more blue down here. Careful around this little lot. So sometimes it's better just to leave a little bit of orange to come through and not muddy everything up. A few lighter areas in here. It's a look like a fairly realistic sky. Some lighter areas here. And we can have some of that breaking through the tree there, just to pull some of that light. Careful you don't end up with green in the sky too much. Sometimes try stuff if that wasn't so successful. Try something else. So too stark, but let's just mess them up a little bit better. And as ever, it's always the tricky part to know when to stop. It's a little bit too bright here. I think it needs to be slightly darker. To compete with the sun, really, the sky. I'll just darken that a little bit in there. Back in with my darks. It's just loads of clouds, all going off in different directions in this scene. I think I've never painted a sky like this before, I don't think, in oils. But good fun. You don't get bogged down with all that detail, and just don't expect to copy it as is. Just go for just reacting to it and doing your take on it. That's probably enough for the sky. So get silly with detail. So let's have a go at putting a little bit of detail on these trees. I've got this fan brush that might do a good job. I've really loaded up. I've got my mold stick here. Give me a little bit of control. So if I just maybe use the edge of the brush just to create the impression of a tree a little bit more. And obviously be careful, if I change the shape of it too much, it will affect what the reflections will be. So I don't want to do that. Further away, probably the less detail they would be visible anyway. So we've also got opportunity here to put dark against light with these dark areas across the reflection there, where there's just plants growing up here. Maybe a chance to put a little bit of colour. I can see some reds in there. Bit of lime crimson into that little lot. Maybe a touch of that red. Use it up. This is kind of in shadow, or it's not receiving a lot of light, so I don't want to be using bright red. Tempting to get your bright red out and go for a really colourful, but it just wouldn't fit with the scene. And we don't need to paint them all. We can suggest stems. Longer blades of grass. So it's difficult to get the paint to come off because there's so much paint on here, so it's just to do your best. There's a little bit of sparkle on the water, which is not white paint. It's probably similar to this sort of tone, where just a few little touches there. Really, these details aren't that necessary, really, but maybe just gives it a little bit of sparkle. And just really noticed it, but there's nice bit of light the distance there. That's quite nice. I think that's worth having. You've got to just lay the paint on because it get muddy. There, reload the brush each time. Need to be horizontal, really. The rigger's the best tool for that job, isn't there? Finally, just a few horizontal lines there as well. So I think we'll call that a day. We'll pop it in a frame and see what it looks like. So I found a nice frame that I think would suit the painting quite well. So just painting simple shapes. Make sure I get the tone correct. Colour wasn't that important. You know, I've got the colours fairly close, but it reads well as a painting, and it's kind of captured what I wanted. I've got you know, some nice brushwork in there that is quite interesting to look at. So quite pleased with that. So let me know in the comments what you think. If you decide to give it a go, good luck, and I'll see you on the next video.